Welcome to In Case You Forget, a podcast for foster care caseworkers who carry more than anyone sees. If this work feels heavy and follows you home, this is a space to process, reflect, and remember why you said yes. I'm Jamie Cabe.
And I'm Jamie Finn. We're so glad you're here. Today, we are excited to introduce you to Cheryl Nitz. Cheryl is a licensed clinical social worker with over 30 years of experience specializing in attachment, trauma, foster care, and adoption. Cheryl serves as chair of the Department of Social Work at Liberty University, where she helps prepare future social workers to lead with compassion and a commitment to justice. She also brings her personal insight as a parent of 4, 2 through adoption, and a grandparent of 6. And her doctoral research focuses on attachment and emotional intimacy in the healing process.
Yeah, and we're excited to explore really in this episode how you can be real and vulnerable and nurture these healthy relationships outside of work while knowing there's like this tension of you're holding stories that aren't yours to tell. Man, Cheryl, we're so happy to welcome you to the show. Thanks for being on today.
Okay.
I want to just kind of speak to what I just introduced. Caseworkers have such a challenging role. They're carrying hard and heavy stories, and these stories that they carry do impact them. They have real impact, and yet they're not their stories to share. At the same time, you know, their friends and family outside of work might not fully understand like what it's like to carry that weight. So as we get started here, I mean, let's just talk about that tension, that weight they carry.
Well, first, I do want to thank you for a chance to be here. And I got to hear a little bit about Jamie and Jamie's stories. So neat to think about some things that we have in common, certainly common passion to support caseworkers. And honestly,
Sure.
I feel like I'll probably get teary on you. I'll just warn you right now because this is close to my heart. But I want to thank the social workers. I want to thank the caseworkers that are supporting families because you do get it. As Jamie shared, I am a foster and adoptive mom. And I know there were days when God really used our caseworkers to support us through some really challenging seasons. And they were the ones that got it when my daughter was peeing in the heater vents or taking the knife to the kitchen cabinets, or the beautiful moments when, you know, she'd turn to me and say, I'm so glad I have a family now. You know, there's the journeys that we walk through together are just amazing. And to watch God at work in healing with our kids is hard work, but it is good work and full of joy.
That's right.
And full of hope. And I just want to thank the people that might be listening.
Love it.
You probably have an impact way beyond what you have any idea. I can still remember the faces of some of the workers that I worked with. I can still remember a moment on the couch in my living room, my striped couch. I can still see it when she walked me through a really difficult season. So thank you for that. But we know, as you mentioned, Jamie, that it's heavy, that has a cost. You can't, to serve kids well, to serve foster families well, requires a willingness to walk through some of that pain with them and being willing to hear the stories and hold some of that emotion and to not stay so distant and so cold that we're not touched by it. So I think that the willingness to hear those stories and imagine a little bit what that is really critical. But like you said, that means we're carrying all these stories, multiple stories around. I was a foster care social worker many years ago. God led me into that field before I started doing my clinical work. One of the things that I had to learn was how can I be 100% present with somebody in the moment and then learn to release that back to him. And I can talk more about that later if you want, but to release that back to him so that I could go home and be a mom and be a sister and a daughter and a church member and invest in those people in my lives. And, I know you mentioned we absolutely have to have those close relationships, those secure attachments. It sounds like you guys talked about this a little bit a podcast or two ago. We absolutely need those primary attachments of people that we know support us and for us. And we will want to be able to share some things we're going through, but like you said, also balance the privacy and confidentiality of the people that we serve, because that's a sacred trust. It's hard. We can't carry it alone, yet at the same time, we can't share everything that we would like to sometimes.
Yeah, Cheryl, I'm going to ask you to go back to what you said maybe we could go back to, because I know even as a foster adoptive mom and the trauma that plays out in my home, that sometimes it feels almost like I have to dissociate from the roller coaster of the emotion and the pain and the behavior and the story, but I don't want to dissociate from the other side of it, which is the love and the joy and the tenderness. And so can you speak to that, as you said, that you want to be 100% present, but then you have to figure out how to be present at home also?
So good.
Yeah, I mean, they're big questions. It's not an instant insight. And now I know how to do it, right?
Yeah, sure.
It's a practice. It's a skill. I think there's a lot of pieces to it. I think one is cultivating. People use the word metacognition, thinking about what we're thinking.
That's good.
Becoming aware in the moment. Okay, what's going on for me? Especially if we're getting activated, feeling some strong emotions. What's going on for me? A mentor many years ago taught me mad, sad, glad, scared. It's easy to remember. So what's going on? Am I mad? Am I, frustrated? Am I sad? Am I glad? Am I scared? Maybe a combination of those things. What's that coming from? So that I can understand my own thoughts, feelings, emotions, I think is really important. And some of us are really good at that. And for some people, it's a new skill. And so I think cultivating that awareness is part of it. I think another part of it is learning. I remember a mentor telling me once, and this has more to do with understanding, you mentioned trauma, understanding the role that trauma plays in our kids' behavior and it doesn't have to be kids, it can be adults. We interact with foster care caseworkers or interacting with biological families and things like that. And sometimes they're responding to us out of their own trauma. I think developing an understanding of trauma and how that can sometimes can provoke lots of unhelpful responses that can feel hurtful or feel personal, can kind of help us depersonalize it, realizing this person is reacting out of their pain. It's the way that they know how to cope with their discomfort, even if that's combative or seems mean or unnecessarily disruptive, or if they withdraw or whatever is going on that seems problematic. So I think cultivating a compassion for where that's coming from. I remember one of my favorite things that a therapist who was working with me with one of my kids taught me was being sad for them when she was raging or she was being challenging or I was feeling. I mean, some of this is depersonalizing. I think it's so easy for us as moms to think, am I doing it wrong? Maybe if she had a different mom, she would be acting differently. But for us to understand, certainly imperfect, certainly we're all a work in progress, but my job is just to be 100% faithful in what God's putting in front of me in that moment and understand that sometimes her response is out of her pain. And it's sad that she can't use her words yet. It's sad that she's acting out instead of being able to talk through whatever's going on inside for her. But then that other part of that 100% faithful to me is learning God is elected to use me in this child's life or this person's life, which is an incredible privilege that he entrusts to us, hurting people, hurting children that he cares deeply about. But he doesn't expect anything beyond what I'm capable of or what I can muster in the moment. And I know he'll fill my gaps. So my job is just to figure out how do I be 100% faithful in the moment right now to how he wants me to respond, and then release it back to him and trust him with the results. And he'll either work through me, woohoo, I get to be part of it, or in spite of me. He'll fill my gap because I know he loves those kids even more than I do. He wants good things for them. He will ensure his good purposes are accomplished in their life. And I get to be a part of it, but I really can't mess it up. He's not going to let me be so powerful that I'm going to ruin anybody. So that's a great comfort to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking about this whole idea of being 100% present when you're with them and then releasing. So like at the office, I think also it's hard because we know casework extends beyond the office.
Right.
Yes.
But like practically speaking, like you've been driving a child somewhere and they jump out of the car and your whole insides are swirling and you don't even know like how to get yourself back to like ground, like steady, right? And obviously, and then you're with that child and you're having to like be present and do what you need to do. And then it's been chaos and crisis. And now all of a sudden, like you got to go home. And now you have a 2-year-old at home who's like crying and wants you. And like, how do you do that?
Right.
You know, where you're like, what do you do practically to just like give a little bit of space before you enter the next a different kind of chaos, maybe, but a different, and we need all the answers, Cheryl, right now.
There's so many. I mean, some of it, I think the releasing and then doing life is about a separation, like I said, it's being 100% faithful to what you're doing in your role during that time. But my day ends. And I might have been on call. It might have gone till 9:00 at night or something like that. But at the point that I end that role, that there's some kind of clear delineation that I'm no longer Cheryl, the caseworker. I'm now Cheryl, the mom, or Cheryl, the wife, or the sister, or the best friend, or whatever role I have. And as clearly as you can. And I think part of that has to do with how we view our role as the caseworker, that I am not responsible for the outcome of this child's life. I'm responsible to be faithful with the tasks that I have. And to me, releasing that back to the Lord means that I can go home and be with that 2-year-old that needs me, knowing that it might be a rough night for that client that I'm leaving behind, but I've left them in the Lord's hands. And to me, that's really important, that I can't be responsible for all that client's decisions. I can't be responsible for them 24 hours a day. That's not the job. Now, if I get called for emergency, then I need to respond in that moment. But that I think the more you can understand the boundaries of what your responsibility is, I'm not responsible for the outcome with that client. It helps you be faithful and then release it. And then some kind of ritual. And I've heard people do different things with transitioning from work to home. I've heard some people say it's worship music. I told my students, if I had a really hard day, it was hard rock. Classic rock.
That's so good. You're headbanging.
If it was, but there's something, or maybe it's soothing, smooth jazz. I don't know. And maybe it's a prayer, releasing those folks back to the Lord and helping him prepare you for the next. I know one person said it's going, nobody carries a briefcase anymore, I don't think. But back in the day with the briefcase, I remember a colleague telling me he would visually in his mind visualize there was a bush outside his front door, and he would visually imagine putting his briefcase onto the bush. Of course he did, and he couldn't leave it outside before he walked into the house. This is the end of this day. Now I'm going to be present. But somewhere along that ride, and it depends on how long your commute is, I remember I would try to shift from starting to think about, okay, who are the people waiting for me at home, or what do they need from me? Asking God to help me see them with his eyes, with his compassion, with what he wants from me for him. And maybe that means sometimes going in, maybe you didn't have enough of a break and you need to tell somebody, I need a little quiet time, and then I'll help you with your homework. Or I need to go upstairs and change my clothes, and then you linger for a little bit before you come down.
We all do that.
It depends on your situation, but, building in that little, but being very decided about that.
Man, that was, I feel like that answer, that's the money shot right there. That was so good. And what I love is that it was part theological. Basically, you trust God that you did what he called you to do, and then you place these people that you were serving right back in his hands, where actually they've been the whole time anyway.
Right.
So I love that deeply theological piece that I think is a really strong foundation. We can't just look at the ritual. We have to look at the belief too.
Right.
But then I love that really practical ritual. And I think just defining what that ritual is going to be, I think would be so helpful. I love that answer. And while Jamie was sort of asking from the point of view of how do you release so that you can show up for your people, I want to ask sort of the same question from a different place, which is how do you release so that then you can ask people how to show up for you? So again, we're keeping stories that are not ours sacred for the people who they belong to. And we need our people to show up for us sometimes, and we need their prayer and their care and their practical help. So how do you not just be available to show up for other people and their needs, but how do you communicate your needs and share with others what you need?
I love that you asked that, because I think that the field of social workers, the group of foster and adoptive parents, people helpers broadly.
Yeah, sure.
Are often notoriously bad at this.
Yep.
Some people would even say some of us are compulsive caregivers, that
Sure.
we are predisposed, sometimes because of some of our own pain, sometimes because either something we've gone through or somebody that we love deeply has gone through, that God softened our hearts and has motivated us. He's moving us outward to move towards people in pain, to move towards wanting to be part of the solution.
Yeah.
And that is a beautiful thing. That's God making beauty from ashes, because he's taken that suffering and helped us now to serve other people. But sometimes that means we really stink at receiving care from people and asking for that. So I'd love that you asked that. But something that's really important about is secure attachment. I know you guys talked about this a little bit before, is that attachment to be healthy has to be reciprocal. And that's you caring for the people in your life. It's you showing interest and finding out what are their needs, what are their desires, helping them communicate that to you, being willing to meet them where they are and experiencing the joy of that. But it's also you being willing, and I would argue that it's even a gift to other people, to let them know how to love you well, to let them, what would be meaningful to you. And you tailor that to the individual people in your life. We certainly all have what I call ministry relationships, where they're innately imbalanced, where we put in a lot more than we get out. And that's okay. God calls us to a limited number of those. But we do need those secure relationships in our life that are balanced, where we can say, where we can ask for what we need, or we can say, hey, can I share with you something that would be helpful to me? And actually, I didn't say it, but even embedded in that little ritual at the end, where I was talking at the end about when you come home, it'd be a great thing to talk about your family with. When I come home and I've had a really hard day, I want to be a good mom, good wife, good roommate, whatever. And I know that I'm really fatigued. Let's talk about what those first 10, 15 minutes looks like. And would it be okay with you if I went upstairs and I took, 15 minutes? Can you handle that? Or do you need me to come look in you in the eyes, give you a kiss, say, hi, I'm glad to be home, and then go take my 10 or 15 minute break? But to have those kinds of conversations that say, we both want to care for each other well. And that's healthy. And to be able to not just tune in other people's needs, but to be able to identify my own, what would help me, be able to be willing to express that, ask for that, making small requests, to be able to be present, but also ask for alone time and recharge time, if that's what you need, is really, really important. When I talk to my students, I say, I want you to be able to be an awesome social worker for decades.
That's good.
For decades. And I think this is part of long-term healthy relationships, is learning to have that reciprocity.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, I'm thinking, I love that, including your kids in, or your loved ones or your friends or whatever in, what does it look like? Here's what I'm experiencing. Like, I'm going to be very tired. I care about you. I want to, but I'm human. So I have limits. Right. I mean, it makes me think, because I have lots of teenagers in my family and lots of children in general. So I go to bed early every night, almost every night. And a lot of people, you always hear, you have to stay awake longer than your kids. Otherwise they won't talk to you, like your teenagers, And I've just kind of been like, I don't know that I agree with that. I actually don't agree with that fully, because my teenagers still talk to me, but they also know that I'm going to bed at 9:00 pretty much every night. And I've just told them, like, for sure, if there's something you need, come get me, wake me up. Sure. Or sometimes they will request, like, can we talk? And I'll stay up later. But I have told them I'll be a better mom to you if I go to bed in good time and then get up early and I spend my time with the Lord. And it's just like, I think it's good for our kids to understand we have limits.
Yeah.
And it's good for our friends to understand and all of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's so important. And I love, you're teaching them how to have a healthy relationship.
Right? Exactly.
You're teaching your teenagers to consider their mom, to consider other people. I think that's really, really important. I think we can even do that at younger ages too, just to have them start to understand, I love you. Like you said, I'm going to be there for you. And if you need me, you let me know. But part of being in a relationship is caring for me too, and what's going to be helpful for me. So that's great. Love that.
That's good. So we've talked a lot about sort of within your family. So kind of this idea of like stepping in the house and now I need to be ready. What about just broader friendships? I think of just that question of like, what do you do? And then the next question is like, so tell me about your, and how do you cultivate friendships where people can be supportive of you within your role, even again, with holding that protection and not overwhelming people, like trauma dumping on people. Let's talk broader than just sort of our people. How do you build that with others, with friends?
Well, you're making me recall, like I said, I was a foster care social worker for about 15 years.
Okay.
So
that's a long time, Cheryl. You really put in your time.
Long time. Yeah, well, that's not, but anyway, I had a couple different roles, but that's about right. But what I learned about friends, and so I have passed this on, is friends serve different functions. Different friends serve different functions. It is kind of important to know your friends and the people that you've cultivated relationships with, and tune into what are they able to offer you? What is this unique relationship going to be characterized by? An example that I give sometimes is it was just kind of an epiphany. I remember at one point I finally realized I was trying to make my friendships like look all the same. And there's one friend that I have that I realized she couldn't go deep. She just couldn't. That just wasn't there. I would keep trying. I really enjoyed her. We had so much in common. And, I would try to share more deeply with her. And she didn't go there. She just wasn't comfortable. I thought she needs to feel safer. I tried a lot of things. And I finally realized, but you know what? She could make me laugh. She was fun to be around. And so I finally kind of embraced that. And I realized that sometimes I didn't need to talk. I needed to go watch a funny movie, or I needed to go, I don't know, dance in the rain, or go to a kids festival and do face painting or something, And so God used her to bring lightness to my life, to bring joy. And that was as important as processing any deep trauma or anything that I had. I had another friend who would tell you quite to your face, don't come to me if you want a shoulder to cry on. She said, I'm going to tell you the truth. I am not a warm bath. That was the word she used. I am not a warm bath. So I knew that if I told her any kind of situation, she'd tell me straight up, Cheryl, you're making too much of this. Or Cheryl, you need to take, whatever. I knew she'd speak truth. Yeah. And that was kind of her role that God had.
Yep, sure.
I think that there's very few people that I've entrusted with some of the challenges on a deeper level. And I think I chose them carefully. I can think of probably not more than one or two. And then I had to, like you said, still guard people's privacy. But it's kind of measuring, would you like to know more? Because there's some days that are really hard. But I think that there's a way to talk about things without having any identifying information that's not necessary anyway. And I can think of one person in particular that came to understand that this was a rough day. I had a kid that the judge decided that they needed to go home, and I don't feel like they're safe, and it's really hard. It's keeping me up at night. And she would help me sit, and she'd ask me a good question. Do you feel like you did what you needed to do? Did you feel like you took good care of them? Do you feel like, and she was a believer that God has good things for them even when you can't see it. And so I felt understood without sharing, details.
Wow.
I know Jamie has a question, but I do want to just say, I love that you gave us an example of how you do it, because you were sharing a general, and then it was about you. And did I do it? Am I entrusting them to God? And that's how we can invite our friends into it is, can you care for me and ask me questions about myself and my heart and my beliefs, that your friend wasn't like, oh, what did mom do?
No, exactly. That would be my sign that that's not the right person.
Exactly. Exactly. Right. That this isn't like a juicy piece of gossip. I'm carrying something. Right. And so I'm going to share enough for you to understand how heavy this is for me.
Yes.
But then we're just going to talk about me and my heart and my struggle in it.
Right. Great distinction. Distinction. Yeah.
No, I actually didn't even have a question right then, Jamie. I was just really appreciating, Cheryl, how you were sharing. I was thinking of all the caseworkers who are up at night because they care so much about those kids and those families. And I just know that that's just a burden to bear. And I just want to acknowledge like how much we appreciate that. I'm thinking of foster parents who are in the trenches and navigating these really hard things, and just knowing that so many caseworkers are right there with them, hurting with them,
That's good.
crying with them, up at night with them.
Yeah.
You know, that's just so often the case. We know that's not always the case, but that's so often the case.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, in walking, some of the closest relationships I had was when I was a foster parent with the caseworker, when I was a caseworker with a foster parent, because we could talk freely about the situation. Of course, I had to do it when I was a professional. I had to do it in a way that was going to be helpful, right? And hopeful, not just bringing each other down because we're commiserating about the situation. But those can make for some really, really deep, supportive relationships just because we're walking alongside and seeking God together in it. Yeah.
Maybe speak a little bit more to that, because you said, as in the professional way, there was a little distinction how to make it hopeful and helpful. Talk about like that in building relationships, the difference between just commiserating together or just venting versus really building each other up.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, no, I think that's really, really important. When I walk out that door, when the conversation ends, my goal would be that that person is going to feel heard, certainly, understood deeply, but that they're going to feel hopeful. The hopeful, it doesn't Pollyanna. It's not like, oh, this is all going to work out here, but that we know that God's at work. God has good things for them, even when we can't see it sometimes. And sometimes Psalms is full of great, great examples of David crying out, I don't understand where you are, God, but still trusting that God is at work. Maybe the sense of hopefulness goes back to that idea of, I know I'm being faithful to what I need to do, and that's what I can do, and that's all God asks of me, and that's all that I can do. And sometimes I think as a caseworker, you have the privilege of having a breadth of experience that you can share with foster parents of how God has worked through situations that did look so bleak.
That's good.
And of course, again, not sharing details that would not be appropriate to share, and to let people know they're making a difference. One of the things, when I was a therapist, I used to work with kids who had been through a series of foster homes and often were ultimately adopted. And sometimes I've shared the story with foster parents that I'll never forget. This one little boy that was sharing his story. I used to do pictures. He would draw pictures of his life, kind of creating a life book. And he made a picture, had made a series of pictures when he was still with his birth family, and there was a lot of difficulties there. He made a picture of foster family that he had stayed with, and it had sunshine and trees and fruit on the trees and a dog and a pool and these bright colored curtains and this happy family playing on the lawn and all this kind of stuff. And I looked at his history, and we talked about, so what do you remember? He did not remember their names. He did not remember, but he talked about this family that he had lived with.
Wow.
And he said, I remember, I don't know, macaroni and cheese. I remember playing in the pool or whatever. And he had been there 2 weeks.
Wow.
2 weeks. This was 6 years later. He had lived there for 2 weeks. What I saw in that was he felt loved. He felt cared for. He saw what a family could be. He saw what love could look like. I think how profound that was. That gave that child a sense of hope and a sense of possibility, even though, frankly, he was a tough kid. And he went through a series of foster homes, disruptions because of some of the behavior. And this was 6 years later. And I remember thinking, I wish I could go back. I wish I could find that family and tell them what impact they had made. So sometimes we have opportunities to share stories from somebody else. Sometimes some of the most painful stories I've seen, kids that have gone back home to less than ideal situations, to biological family, that can be really traumatic and difficult after they've experienced some positive and some healing and have gone back. Now, obviously, we hope that for many situations, the family has addressed the issues and there's healing in the family and that's a positive outcome, that reunification. Sure. But sometimes it's not. But I remember this one young woman, she connected with me when she was, I don't know, maybe 20, something like that. Home was hard. And it broke her foster parents' heart that she went back to a home where she ended up being a caregiver of some substance using parents. But she made a connection with the local librarian. So God provided, and that she said, I would go to the library every single day and I would meet with Miss So-and-so. And she ended up seeing herself as capable of more than she had ever dreamed through this librarian, ended up going to community college. I don't know what happened after that, but I mean, just really a beautiful, soft heart that this young girl had. So who knows what God's up to? You know, we have our ideas, we have our suggestions to him about what we think should happen. But
yeah, Cheryl, I just want to yes and amen that as a foster parent,
yes,
for the foster care caseworkers who are listening,
yes,
man, would that build encouragement and faith into my heart. And so, yeah, I want to agree with you from the other side. Please share those stories of hope when it looks hopeless. Share the stories of impact when you're questioning impact. That is something you can do that transforms a foster parent's perspective, which then, of course, impacts the kids and the families and everyone. And so it's transformative to share stories of encouragement and hope like that with the families you're serving, including, let's say, the biological families, the ones who can't see a way out of their addiction, or to share the stories. Hey, I had this client and they overcame so much that's so powerful.
Absolutely.
So thanks for sharing that.
You're making me think of all these stories. Yeah. And when you're talking with biological families, I remember this mom, she just thought, is she ever going to forgive me? Is my daughter ever going to forgive me? And I saw them maybe 3-4 years after she had returned home. Oh, beautiful story of redemption.
That's awesome.
And the relationship between this mom and her daughter. It was just, but she needed that encouragement to know she could start again with her daughter. And she was willing to walk through asking her daughter for forgiveness. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful,
that's beautiful
story. But I should have said, I just have to say one thing before I move on from that is, it can't be premature, right? You can't offer the hope as a Band-Aid. People have to feel heard first.
That's good.
So, and I think that as professionals, we get trained to recognize that. When's that moment that the client, the biological family, the foster child moves from, I just need you to know how hard my life is right now, because they need you to be there in that moment. They need you to just listen and not send your platitudes and not paste Bible verses and not just nod your head and try to move them too quickly, but watch for that moment when they're ready for a solution, for what now? For what do I do with this? And so that's an important key moment, is knowing some people need to vent for a long time before they're ready to hear that. And other people get there pretty quick and they're like, give me something. I need something to get me through tomorrow.
That's good.
That's right. Well, and it makes me think of our listeners. I want them to see themselves in this story too, as when a child is drawing that picture of the 2 weeks he's been with that one foster family. This is the impact you are making as well as the caseworker, because you may be the one consistent person that this child has had. And I remember talking to an adult. I mean, we've done this. I've talked to lots of adults who've said this, but I'm thinking of one specific who was just like, I had one caseworker my whole experience, which we know is very unusual.
Yeah.
But he just affirmed how big of a difference that made, that caseworker was just huge in his life. Absolutely. And so let's just I just want you as our listeners to know, you matter so very much. I mean, that's what this whole podcast is all about, is your work matters and so do you.
That's good.
Yeah.
But it's very true.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like you said, you might be the first person. I remember it was a colleague of mine, but I remember her saying, highest compliment I ever got. It was a birth mother, the biological mother that she was working with. She says, you are the first person in my life that's ever believed in me. You're the first person that I thought I could do it if I set my mind to it. And she said, what a high compliment, but what a tragedy. That I was the first person, but what a high compliment, and how God can use those relationships. And like you said, working with kids that for the first time may feel seen, somebody that's walking alongside with them, just huge, huge difference. And not afraid to talk about the hard stuff either. Not afraid to say how hard things are, but also, again, being hopeful.
Yeah, just being real and vulnerable.
Yes.
And this is why this message is so important today, is for you to be able to be this support system to these kids.
Yeah.
You need to have healthy relationships.
Yeah.
And so take care of yourself, because you matter, and take care of yourself because these kids matter. Cheryl, it has been such an absolute joy to talk with you. We have enjoyed this conversation so much. I mean, Jamie and I, we're just all smiles today. And it's just been really encouraging to hear your heart for our caseworkers and the things you've learned and the stories you've shared. So thank you for being on.
Yeah, Cheryl, we're so grateful. Thank you for sharing with us.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was a privilege. Love to talk about it. Any word that God can use to encourage people in this labor. We're doing His work for sure.
Well, you've done that, so thank you.
If this episode reminded you that you are not alone in this work, share it with another foster care caseworker who may need to hear it. And remember, your work matters, and so do you.
This podcast was edited and produced by Resonate Recordings.